Thank you, Dr. Melton. That brings us to item number 13 on our agenda, Legal Services, Exhibit D. I'll entertain a motion to consider item number 13, Legal Services. Yes, Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we approve the administration's recommendation to approve the attorney firms listed in our packet on Exhibit D.
Is there a second? Ms. Gardner. All right, Dr. Melton, and I saw Mr. Gant, I saw your hand there. But, Dr. Melton, I'll let you set the presentation up for this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cates. Ms. Richardson will actually be presenting this from Exhibit D. Mr. Richardson has been overseeing this process in compliance with Board Policy BDG, and also BDG rule to add to that. Mr. Richardson has also supervised the procurement responsibilities to make sure that we're in compliance with the procurement code. So, Mr. Richardson, I'll ask you to present this informational item, this item for action this evening.
Easy for you to say. Thank you, Dr. Melton. We, seemed like a lifetime ago, advertised for requests for qualifications for legal services. We actually had that broken down, and as you can see, into 4 categories: business, corporate, student affairs, personnel and employment, and property and real estate. What you have here is a list of those firms that were responsive and responsible offerers. So everyone that, every firm that submitted the qualifications in accordance with what we asked was approved and put on this list for your approval tonight. And basically this is all, if you're not sure what all the different categories are, I'll be glad to try to explain those. But we're just asking for approval for all the responsive and responsible offers for legal services for the school district.
Mr. Richardson, just for clarification, because it came through the procurement process because we're doing a request for qualifications, but so often we think of procurement as we purchased something. These are approved lists of potential attorneys. We don't pay them a retainer, or there was no contract awarded through the procurement. We're simply gathered the qualifications of these firms.
That's correct, sir. And as a matter of fact, none of these firms have been contacted until they're approved by board. What our policy says is legal services is exempt from the procurement process. However, it does require board approval for us to hire any attorney firm. So what we did was put out the qualifications, and these are the firms that responded, and this is what you have before you.
Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Hammond?
Did I hear you right? In other words, if you heard from, when you put this report out of what we were doing, if you heard from an attorney, we put them on the list?
Only if they were responsive to the qualifications.
So you might have gotten them from other people, but they didn't meet whatever our qualifications
That's
are.
correct.
Well, tell me if I'm wrong. All of these have been the same ones we've had for several years, right?
Most of these were on the list. We do have a couple of, and I don't recall exactly which ones they were, but there were a couple of new ones that we had respond to us too.
And how often do we go through this process?
This is the first time I've been through this process in 5, 6 years I've been here.
So there's no policy that says every 4 years or every 3. You just do it whenever we want to?
Or if another firm comes along, yes, I guess we could bring that to the board. And I think we have added some since I've been here. I think they were brought individually. It's the first time we've ever been through this process.
Well, I remember of the years I've been on, I know I've only remember voting on them one time. So I think I'm just curious because I know there are a lot of good attorneys in our area. So I just wondered how we had. I just want to know the opportunity and what the process was of the ones we have. So you answered it.
Ms.
I
Hammond,
guess you decide.
If I could add to that, obviously the policy doesn't necessarily set a time frame, but there is an annual evaluation according to the rule that the administration will do to make sure that the services that we're seeking are what we're looking for. But there have been some firms that have been used that have had changes and name changes and other kinds of variables have shifted, so we thought it was important to go through the process again, opening it up for anyone that meets the qualifications to have a chance to competitively be added to this list. Ms. Richardson, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you've nailed it.
Mr. Lovelace.
Mr. Chairman, I'm deeply troubled by something. I was handed just this afternoon, a copy of Code of Laws of South Carolina, 813-3442. And in that, I think I need to make an amended motion. And it reads as such: copies of the South Carolina Code of Laws 813-42 as attached is now being handed out by a fellow board member. The South Carolina Ethics Commission filings indicate that the board members have taken contributions from law firms on the district-provided proposed list of attorneys prior to participation tonight. I therefore make the motion that we table any action on this agenda item until the South Carolina Ethics Commission and the State Attorney General rule after submission by request of attorneys other than those on the list upon the lawfulness of this proposed action. Respectfully submitted.
Mr. Lovelace, are you offering this as an amendment?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second? Ms. Hammond seconds. Any discussion on the amendment? The amendment would effectively table the recommendation. And to be clear, the recommendation is not that we engage any of these firms, but these firms were found to be responsive to the request for qualifications that were sent out. There are a limited number of firms that specialize in school law, so that was part of that qualification. So these firms have not been engaged by this motion or by this process, but are available to be engaged. Any discussion on the amendment?
I have a question on the amendment.
Yes, ma'am.
So from the statement you just made, you're saying that the vote tonight is just that these people are available. That doesn't mean we're using them.
That's exactly as it was, yes, ma'am, as presented in the memorandum and by Mr. Richardson. This would be our list of approved attorneys that we could engage because they responded and were found to be responsive to the request for qualifications. And Mr. Gann, I see your hand. In 1 second, I'll come to you.
Then can I ask Mr. Lovelace, since I just now saw this, is this a new law?
I'm not an attorney, but I don't think so. But the copy that I handed out has 2018 on it, but I don't know what that means.
Mr. Gant. I'm sorry, Mr. Gant. We are back to having some difficulty. Mr. Gant, if you will allow me to call you, and I will have your audio that way.
Mr.
I'm going to put you on speakerphone. 1 second. All right, Mr. Gant. Hold on 1 second. What do we need to do here from a technology staff? I'm going to call you on the landline. Yeah, if you'll mute your computer, please. And I think Rachel may be trying to call you on the number we're on, so here we go. Are you calling me?
Welcome to Google Meet. Enter the meeting pin followed by the pound key.
Hold on 1 second. You got your computer muted.
I'm trying.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Gant.
Unbelievable.
Okay, go ahead, Robert.
All right, you good?
Yes, sir.
All right, and I know, I believe, I couldn't hear all of that, and I believe Mr. Lovelace may have handed out a copy of part of the Code of Laws of South Carolina. I was just wondering, the source, did Mr. Lovelace, would he clarify, he said that he got that anonymously this afternoon, or somebody put it in his hand and brought this to his attention. I could not hear what was brought to his attention. I did hear the after discussion pretty much on that. Would you clarify what that was? And I know I'll get a copy of whatever was handed out at the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Lovis, did you hear Mr. Gant, where the material came from?
Yeah, I was just given this by a constituent, a concerned constituent this afternoon.
Thank you. Are there any other questions concerning the amendment?
I have one.
Mr. Cates, I didn't hear that answer. What was it?
I apologize.
Concerns?
He was provided to him by a constituent this afternoon.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I'm going to put this in real common, if I can ask Mr. Lovelace this. In other words, if there's anyone on this list that I have taken a contribution from, I should recuse myself? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I would do if I had taken.
You're asking Mr. Lovelace for a legal opinion, and I'm not prepared
We'll
to
ask
have
Mr. White. How about that?
No, ma'am,
Mr.
that's
White.
not, Mr. White is not the attorney.
This needs to be
Excuse
a
me.
proper. Okay,
I have the floor.
all right.
All right, we're not going to have a legal discussion at the table. There's a motion that we receive the recommendation from the RFQ for responsive attorneys that are qualified by the review from procurement. That motion has been amended. The amendment was provided by Mr. Lovelace that we table this. The amendment received a second, and we're now discussing that. We're not going to have this unfortunately would be a time when we will gauge one of our attorneys of record. All right, so that's where we are. We're dealing with the amendment. Mr. White, you have the floor.
What I was trying to add there is, this isn't the time or place to kick around a statute at this table without what Mr. Cates just indicated, having one of the attorneys evaluate this and advise the district. I mean, this isn't the place to make this decision. I can look at this, I don't understand how it applies based on the wording that's here, and it just isn't an appropriate way to deal with it.
So thank you. Are there any questions about the amendment? About the amendment to the motion? So the amendment is before you. It effectively would table the recommendation from the administration. If you favor the amendment, I'll ask you to raise your hand. If you favor the amendment, Mr. Gant, okay, that's 3. If you oppose the amendment, will you raise your hand? And I record Mr. Gant as opposed to the amendment. So the amendment fails. The recommendation is that the Exhibit D be received as the approved list of attorneys that went through the procurement process with the RFQ. Are there questions about Exhibit D?
Yes, sir, I have one.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Richardson, did you guys look into, or did you look into ways to save money like retainer fees with a total hour cap or anything like that, rather than just straight hourly billing?
No, sir, we did not.
You didn't look into that? Okay.
And Mr. White?
I just want a clarification, because the question of legal fees comes up continuously by people on this board, and then we have these periodic sessions. We've been doing it for years. I think at Ms. Hammond, some other people's requests.
Point of
probably-
order.
Excuse me?
Point of order.
What is your point of order?
He's been allowed to pontificate. If there's a question, let him put it out there, please.
All right, Mr.
We're in a
Lovelace, you-
discussion
there is no-
agenda.
Excuse me, that is not a point of order. You have made no appeal to any parliamentary rule. If you'd like to state a point of order, I'll hear that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let him continue to pontificate.
Oh, I can discuss anything I want to. I mean, it's
But
pontificating
Mr.
or
White,
not.
let's just get,
So the reality is, we go into executive session periodically, and the public needs to understand this, to review legal fees. By far, the vast majority of our legal fees are litigation in the ordinary course that any employer of this size has, and it's personnel matters, it's other matters, and nobody has a word to say about it behind closed doors because it's matters we don't have control over. And we've been evaluating that for over a decade. Ms. Hammond, I think you and some of your peers on the board years ago requested that. And every time we go back there, I can tell you, most of that stuff is things that we're not even directly involved in as a board.
all right, Mr. White. I just want to make sure we're clear. We're not just, there's no commitment to fee. There's no fee arrangement in the RFQ, that we are simply approving a list of attorneys that are available to do work for the district based on their response to the RFQ that was reviewed by procurement. Ms. Hammond.
I understand that. I'm just answering Mr. White, though. We are the ones that approve, or basically allow them to be hired. That's my point.
Okay,
No, but
we're not going to crosstalk. If you have a question and would like to address it to the chair, I'll be happy to entertain a question.
I'll have a question.
I recognize that we have opportunity to discuss fees and that we are in a situation with an employer as large as us, that often those are employment matters or other matters that you would expect from an employer this size. Mr. Lovelace, if you have a question.
I do. Mr. Richardson, you told us that some of the people, some of the law firms that submitted were rejected, or is there a criteria list for each type of attorney that you had?
Yes, sir, there is. There's a whole document out on our website, as a matter of fact, where we did the request for qualifications. I don't recall how many firms, but we did have at least one or two that did not qualify based on those qualifications for any of the categories.
Okay. Could you give me an example? I mean, I'm truly lost on that part of it. I
Well, it was quite a lengthy list of criteria that we evaluated them on. I don't know the particulars of why I didn't do the evaluations personally.
Okay.
So I can't answer the specifics on that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions specifically related to the improvement of the list? Ms. Gardner?
Chairman Cates, do you mind telling us what the board policy says? I know that we've gone over this before, but I need to be reminded. If we approve this list, who actually gets to choose the lawyer from the list if the board needs somebody? Is that you directly? You are the sole, in the past, the chairman has been the sole person responsible for choosing the person off the list.
I believe
Is
the
that true?
policy says the board, and obviously the chair has some responsibilities to the board that might require a legal opinion, and also policy states that the administration can engage one of those attorneys as well. But it's policy, Mr. Richardson, did you say BB? B, all the B policies will tend to run together. It is BDG
It is.
and BDGR. Those are the two.
Right.
Mr. White.
I'm asking for clarification, and maybe Dr. Melton or whoever staff have the answer. What percentage of our, just approximate percentage of legal spend is done by the board? You know, that's tracking Ms. Gardner's question, versus the administration. And that was the point I was trying to make earlier. I think by far, most of the legal spend is done by the administration in the ordinary course of business. But I would like, is there some approximation of the total dollars that the actual board chair or board officers may hire somebody versus you dealing with day-to-day matters that you have to deal with as the superintendent of the enterprise?
Well, we as a staff, Ms. Richardson alluded to earlier the process for qualifications. The executive staff reviewed the request proposals that came in looking for the completed requirements that we were looking for the criteria. So each executive staff member looked through their lens of responsibility and operations for School District 5. Mr. White, I do not have that percentage tonight. We were not prepared for that question. That is one that we could note for our information to follow through so that when Ms. Richardson gets that calculation completed, we can make sure that is communicated to the board for you to have that information. I think it would be hazardous of me to try to make a prediction because I just would not be prepared to share that with an accurate estimation at this point. So, Ms. Richardson, if you'll make note of that, and Ms. Strange, if you'll make note, we will follow through the way we did last board meeting to email all of you that information so that you can have access to it.
Ms. Hutchison.
Thank you. Dr. Melton, I wanted to ask if we had any firms who received requests for their submission, if we had some that did not submit a request or the application, perhaps.
I'm not sure that I understand. So obviously, all law firms would not have competed for this, but it's the ones that made it through our review to look for the qualifications for the completion that we were looking for the details. Ms. Richardson, are you prepared to answer that this evening?
Yes, ma'am. And just so you know, any firm that we've been using, we went ahead and sent them as a complimentary, just because they've done business with us in the past, we sent out the qualification for them. We also advertised this on the state's website. To my knowledge, I think we maybe had one or two firms that did not respond, we actually sent it to them. And then, like I said, we had at least one or two that did not qualify based on the qualifications they sent us.
And Ms. Richardson, you added a note to the memo regarding one particular firm. And would you describe that context to make sure that the board is clear as to why that note was added for their information?
That was just our bond attorneys. We're in the middle of capital budget and financing elementary 13 at the time, so we did not advertise that. We did not want to disrupt that process. We could always go back and advertise that if needed. I don't know that anybody's really got a problem with who we have. You can't get much better than the folks we have now dealing with our debt. But if that's something the board wishes, we can always revisit that.
Ms. Gardner.
Thank you. I didn't get to finish my comment before.
My apologies.
Sorry, but I know that in times past, because there's a paper trail, when it comes to this list that's already pre-approved by us, that it's stating that we think that this is okay for the board chair to then decide who gets to be the lawyer. And I think the thing that I want to question or discuss is, are we allowed to make sure that that the list that's here, that we don't use the same exact lawyer for 3 or 4 different aspects that we need it for? Because that's happened last year. And I have a paper trail, and I don't know if I have the right, but I'd like to add that paper trail to the minutes if I can. I can give those, I have to go home and print them out or email them, that shows that the board chair said that he had the right to do that. And if that is true, then I would like to, if I have the capacity, to make a motion to edit the list. Take somebody off, let them only be in one category so they don't get used for every single lawyering need that we have. So you'll have to tell me if that's possible.
Well, Ms. Gardner, you can, are you asking me, can you amend the list?
Yeah, there are actually 3 requests. One, maybe not a request.
Let me start there, because
Yeah.
that's the one I think I can deal
Okay.
with tonight. Are you asking to amend the list as presented by Mr. Richardson?
Yeah,
And if I understand it, you want to strike, you're
I
not
wanna
asking
strike-
to add anybody.
No,
'cause
I
that
just
would
want to
be-
strike one person off of one particular section, the business section. I will go ahead and say it. I would like to make a motion to strike Montgomery,
Montgomery Willard from
Yeah.
Business Corporate.
from the business, not from the business, from the construction, from the build, I don't even know how it's worded, sorry.
Property real estate.
Property real estate.
All right, there's a motion to strike The second item under property real estate, Montgomery Willard LLC. Is there a second? There is a second. Are there any questions about the amendment?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If I'm correct, he's on all three. But is there any, and I don't know whether this be your question or Dr. Melton's, is there any ethical problem that that person also has been a personal lawyer for sitting board members?
You're raising a question beyond the scope of this board. That would be,
Okay, well, it goes on, she named him, so that's fine. That's okay.
are there questions about Mr. White?
I'm just curious, what's the basis for removing Mr. Montgomery from
'Cause-
construction?
Last year, he was our lawyer for everything that we did, and I'm just a citizen, and I'm here to tell you I have to have one or two or three different lawyers based on what I'm doing. If it's real estate, or if I need to get, for litigation, or if you're going through a divorce, you have to get a different lawyer for every single thing you do. But yet, Mr. Montgomery was our lawyer in 3 or 4 different aspects of law, and I thought that was inappropriate, but I was told repeatedly through a paper trail that I have that we had no right to stop the chair, that he could choose whoever he wanted. So
But-
I would like his name struck from at least partial list, so he can't be our lawyer for every single aspect.
But
of
why
this.
construction? That was my question. Why construction?
I'm just kind of picking one to see, what falls out of the sky, to be honest. Because if I had my preference, I would take him off of business too, but I don't know if that's really fair and appropriate based on maybe a prejudice on my part.
Are there other, Ms. Hutchinson?
Thank you. For property, we only have 3 listed, so that would just give us 2 options. Plus, I will say that several years ago, when we had to do some litigation concerning Irmo High School and Chapin High School, it was Mr. Montgomery who led that charge that basically saved us, I'm not sure how much money, $600,000, I'm not sure how much money, but it was significant. And he saved the school district a lot of money because of his knowledge of construction. He knows a lot about that, and just stood up for the district. So I would hate to see him move out of this, because we have seen evidence of how he can save this school district a lot of money.
Other questions?
There.
Mr. White?
I just want to echo what Ms. Hutchinson was saying. When we had the litigation over the Chapin High School project and the Irmo High School project, we recovered about 97% of the deficiencies we had to deal with in that project through our contractual ability. And I think at the Irmo project, I think it's still the highest recovery ever for liquidated damages. So his expertise and his value, I would suggest to you as a board member, the value of a service provider isn't just to randomly let's cut somebody's name, and there's a lot of politics going on with Elementary 13. And Mr. Montgomery has been one to stand up and interpret our contracts in the face of politics. So the value to the district is what they do in their service. And I think when we go back to dealing with the rest of the issues on Elementary 13, I would like to also delve into how much he actually recovered because one of the questions is, there's all this noise out there about we wasted millions of dollars. That is not true. That was recovered. We had problems with all 3, the contractor, the architect, and the construction manager on those 2 projects, and he recovered 97% of the dollars we had to put into the projects above our contractual obligations. So when you measure attorneys' value, you measure what they deliver in return for the fees you pay, and I can promise you, it is substantially more than we ever paid him. Ms. Hutchinson, what you're saying is what we got back in return, and that's how you measure the value of service providers. And we shouldn't be just randomly saying, okay, let's throw this one out, particularly if there's political aspects that people may want to oppose a service provider. The real question is, how much value do they deliver to the district? And again, we're only talking about a very small portion of what this board does. The superintendent makes those same decisions, I would assume, with the service providers she brings in to handle the routine legal matters that she has to deal with in the district. So that's how I would propose you evaluate somebody, and
I
not
recognize
just
Dr.
randomly
Melton.
throw them out.
Just for a point of clarification, Mr. Richardson, number 4 on our list of property and real estate, can you define that? Because I don't know that that's been clear to the board, and we did not include that with our memo to define. So if you would give some examples of what that may be to include, does that include in construction?
That would actually be when we're either buying or selling properties where we'd use those type of attorneys, not necessarily anything to do with construction. That would be under your business corporate heading there.
All right, thank you. Are there other, let me get other questions, and I'll come back to you, Ms. Gardner. Other questions? Ms. Gardner?
I'd like to amend my motion then to strike him from the business corporate heading instead of the real estate for the same reasons stated before. I just want to, that's my amendment to my amendment. Somebody needs to second it.
Does she need a second?
Well, actually, amendment's been stated and seconded as it is.
I do have the right to amend an amendment.
If you want, we can, you're asking me to say the strike under business corporate rather than property and real estate.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? I'm going to state the amendment. The amendment is to strike item number 3 under business corporate, the firm Montgomery Willard. There's been a motion, there's been a second, and we've had discussion. If you favor the amendment to strike Montgomery Willard, if you'll raise your hand. There's 3 that favor the motion. If you oppose the amendment, will you raise your hand? And it's Mr. Gant as well. The amendment fails. We're back to the original motion to approve the list of attorneys that are available to the district. Ms. Hammond?
This is a new question. In our packet, it says a note. The attached list references Burr, Foreman, McNair under the legal services for the area of practice in regards to bond. The district did not include bonds in the RFQ 2020-016 due to being in the mid-cycle with Burr, Foreman, McNair services in regards. What I was going to say is, since we're in the middle of a service from them, then should they not be on there until, should we vote on them, leave that on there, Mr. Cates, because of that disclaimer up here?
They are on here.
No, I know that, but I'm saying, should they not be one that we're voting on since we did not put out for other bond attorneys? Isn't that what that says, unless I'm
We didn't, did we have any
It
other
says
firms?
note.
We did not solicit,
So if we didn't solicit, it's not giving any other bond attorneys.
but if you remove them from the list, then we have no bond attorneys.
I got you, so you have to vote on it again, even though we're in the middle of a service.
We don't want to remove our one bond attorney, and it's always the option of the board to request another review. I mean, this is not uneditable and deliberate. We can deliberate this in the future.
Okay.
Are there any other questions about the list as presented? Unamended, we're accepting the list of attorneys in Exhibit D as approved attorneys authorized to do business with the district. We've had a motion, a second, and discussion. As many as favor accepting legal services Exhibit D will raise their hand. I have 4. As many as opposed will raise their hand. And I have 3. So Exhibit D passes as presented. That brings us to item number 14. Before I entertain a motion there, I just want to thank Ms. Major Murphy. I don't know, she's probably in the back there. Will you ask your staff to stand with you, please, that are here? Because y'all have been such gracious hosts, and we want to recognize you. And I see Mr. Biedenball, your nutrition staff. Thank you. Thank you for preparing for us. And now I know you got to clean up after us. So I apologize for that. I'll entertain a motion for item number 14, the motion to adjourn. Ms. Hutchison,
I move that we adjourn.
is there a second? Ms. Gardner, any discussion? As many as favor the motion to adjourn will raise their hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Gant. I'm going to hang up on you.